Do you feel like your metabolism is particularly slow? Maybe you feel like you're not able to lose weight as fast as you'd like, or maybe you find that you're always just a little bit chilly, or all the other signs and symptoms that people say that, oh yeah, maybe your metabolism is really slow. Well, on today's episode, we're going to be diving into reasons why that may be, and these are reasons that you're not going to hear on many other platforms because we have an expert who dives in deep with us about reasons why your metabolism may be slowing down. We're going to cue the intro song and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we will be breaking down the strategies and tactics you need to know to build your health, strength, and function without feeling achy, sore, or injured.
We're your hosts, Julie and Charlie, the creators of the Exercise for Life membership. Your podcast starts now.
Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise that's geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and today we are talking about this idea of metabolism and why your metabolism may be slowing down. Now, a lot of people think of their metabolism strictly in terms of weight loss or weight gain. And while that's certainly a sign or symptom that something with your metabolism may be going on, there's a lot more beneath the surface that needs to be explored if we're going to consider this idea of what's happening with your metabolic function. And to guide us through this conversation, we are bringing on an expert guest, none other than Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer. Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer is a physician founder of Well Empowered, where she practices data-driven, outcome-oriented functional medicine. She created Well Empowered with one commitment in mind: guiding you to create the health and vitality that transforms your experience of life and alters what is possible for you. How does Dr. H live true to this? By taking a root cause natural medicine approach. Through working one-on-one with groups or in delivering corporate webinars, Dr. H provides the information, inspiration, and strategies needed to produce sustainable and transformative health outcomes.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's such a treat to be with you and your audience today.
Yeah, Dr. H, I'm so excited for this conversation because I think you have a very unique perspective on medicine, on health, and I really want to dive into it. And it starts with kind of how you describe yourself professionally. You were telling me that you describe yourself as a data-driven functional medicine physician. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So another way I might say those words, right? Data-driven functional medicine practitioner is data-driven natural medicine practitioner. And so ultimately what that means is I use natural measures, natural remedies to support their body's healing process. And we use data, which includes labs, which includes information that only you can give me, right? We're not going to get it in any lab, what you notice about how your body reacts. We might call that a little more information, but, for the sake of the term, we'll call it, put it in the data camp, right? And all of that together allows me to understand what is the targeted path ahead, right? So we're not just throwing darts. We get to take a very customized, individualized, and targeted approach. And it allows us to address the root cause of symptoms or health challenges or health, conundrums, all those different things that someone might come to see me for. And so ultimately, it's so cool because even for me, after doing this for so long, every time I have the privilege of collaborating with someone and being a part of their healing process, it just leaves me present to how spectacular our body is.
That's so cool. So was there a period of time in your career when you weren't as focused on the data, or was this something that right from the get-go, when you decided you wanted to practice medicine, you took this approach?
Yes, the latter. So
Okay.
Right when I started, right when I stepped out with my license, this is the approach I started to take, right? Really getting, and of course, like all of us as we are in our professional roles, hopefully we're always evolving and gathering new information and tools and ways we can contribute more fully. But fundamentally speaking, one of the big thing that I saw missing is, right, there are a lot of health coaches out there or people out there saying this diet works for me, you should do it, sort of thing. but bodies are different, right? And so being able to understand that the way, a symptom might manifest for many different reasons, right? And so being able to really understand what's going on with the individual in front of me has always been really compelling, because, guiding someone to express their fullest health, it really lets them be freed up and fully contribute their gift to the world. And to me, that's what this is all about.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So, we've talked a little bit about, hey, people will come to you with certain symptoms and whatnot, and I definitely want to get into those. But as kind of as an adjunct question, do you also work with people who are maybe symptom free, but just want to try to optimize their health, or for lack of a better term?
Yes, I do. I definitely have the people who come to me saying like, okay, I'm doing everything I know to do. I want to know if there's something else I should be doing. Right. So yes, I do have those people as well. And, it's interesting because when I work with people one-on-one, where we start is with, after we do kind of like, like a 30-minute complimentary consultation, so they can get to know me, I can get to know them, we can make sure it's a good fit. The next step is a 90-minute conversation. So I always find it fun. It's like I get to put on my detective's hat and start to, really get the lay of the land for where the person is, their health history, their family health history, right? What are their unique genetic Achilles heels? Is there something I really want a piece of information I want to gather so that we can, do everything we know to do to support them in a future that is defined by health and vitality.
I love it. That's awesome. So when you're thinking of the different tests that you're running, are there some tests that you often run that aren't normally run in traditional medicine that end up showing like a lot of that give you a lot of insight into what's going on? Like, are there any tests like that?
Oh my gosh, Charlie, the list is so long. Yes. And I would say two things. First of all, there's the actual tests, like the actual tests I run that are not frequently run in traditional medicine. And then there's secondly, even the tests I do run that might have been run before, I look at them differently, right? Because I'm not looking at these numbers as black or white, right? Normal or abnormal. I'm looking at it, okay, based on what I know about the person in front of me, their symptoms or their genetic Achilles heels, what would I consider optimal for this person, right? Because optimal for you might not be optimal for me in a certain category, right? And so there's two things. Yes, the actual lab tests and then how I view them. But yes, in the way of, oh my God, the list is very, very long. And I put these into two camps. There's quote unquote standard lab tests. And those standard lab tests, I call them standard because you go to Quest to have your blood drawn, and Quest is a big lab company that is all throughout the country, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm ordering, again, what I order there is very comprehensive. And then there's a whole world of specialty lab tests. These are things like doing a really comprehensive assessment of the microbiome, very different than when you can get over the counter with Biome or something like that. These are 3-day comprehensive assessments, and we get all kinds of information there. Specialty food sensitivity tests, also, again, not ones you can get at, like Everlywell. Things that look at your adrenals and your sex hormones and your detox pathways. So in the way of, certain tests that I would run that I might run that wouldn't be found at a traditional, medical practitioner. Those are some examples.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. So let's get into some of the symptoms that people may come to see you with. Like is it very broad, or are you more kind of like, hey, I only work with, women 50 plus that are experiencing like XYZ? Like what's that look like for you?
So I would say the majority of people who I work with have high on their to-do list, master their weight. And by that, I mean, get off the weight loss roller coaster, right? People who have gained weight and lost weight over and over again for years or maybe even decades. So that's, I'd say probably about 60% of the people who I work with.
Sure.
But oftentimes it's not the only thing on their mind. And also then there's the other 40%, right? So other high on the list things that people come to see me for are digestive distress, whether that's bloating or constipation or diarrhea. I would also put in that world everything autoimmune, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. And then the last camp would be hormonal abnormalities, whether that's around menstrual cycles or fertility for men or women. And then there are definitely a nice healthy helping of conundrums, right? Like I just got a Zoom appointment with a woman earlier today who one of her conundrums was that she was having recurrent dizziness throughout the day. She did all the appropriate workup. She had an MRI. She went to a neurologist. She did all the things that she should do to make sure it's not something scary.
Sure.
Fortunately, it wasn't, but it left her with symptoms and no place to go.
Yeah.
Right. And for her, it turned out to be the result of some food sensitivity tests and food sensitivities that we found out through a food sensitivity test. So that ended up being the source of her dizziness.
Wow. That's so interesting because a lot of times I think when people think about food sensitivities, they're like, oh, I don't eat this food because like you're saying, it makes me bloated or, I get the runs or like maybe, my skin breaks out or something like that. Like I know I've personally definitely experienced like the skin issues regarding the foods I was eating. So I changed what I was eating and, my skin conditions changed. But I've never heard that with dizziness. You just wonder like how many symptoms people are experiencing that are related to these unknown sensitivities to their foods.
Yes, absolutely. And I see it a lot. I mean, it's like, it becomes fun for me when someone comes to me with a conundrum, right?
Sure.
And we're in a place where we know it's nothing scary. Great. We want to be sure of that. And then we can dig in and see, okay, there is a reason. What is the reason? Right. And so, yes, those food sensitivity, to your point, oftentimes don't show up as digestive distress. They can show up in a lot of different ways. And kudos to you for being able to make the connection with your skin. Definitely a big one there. Yeah.
Thank you. So I know you mentioned weight loss, and that really is a big topic for a lot of people, something that they want to improve on. You talked about this weight loss roller coaster. And so, when we were talking earlier, you say, hey, there are some things that can kind of be causing your foot to be, as you described, the foot to be on the brake of the metabolism. If I remember that correctly, like why your metabolism has its foot on the brake, I believe was the phrasing. Can we talk about that? Because a lot of people struggle with this and a lot of people are really frustrated by this. So what have you seen in your experience?
Yes. So there are 3 reasons that I see over and over again that are the source of, your metabolism having its foot on the brake, right? And first I'll list them and then I'll describe them one by one. So the 3 are inflammation, impaired insulin sensitivity, and impaired detoxification. So elevated inflammation, increased inflammation, impaired insulin sensitivity, and then impaired detoxification. So starting with that first one, inflammation, right? Sometimes I'll talk to someone and they might say, oh gosh, I'm just really inflamed. And I'll ask them a little bit more, how's it show up in your body? And maybe they'll say, my joints hurt, or my skin's red, or I'm bloated, right? They'll say whatever they have to say. But, inflammation, beyond the experience of it, it is a measurable, knowable number, right? We can actually do labs to understand someone's inflammation, inflammatory load. And more often than not, people don't really have obvious symptoms of inflammation. In other words, their body's really, really inflamed, but it's not, their joints don't hurt, their digestion's fine, their skin, it's not showing up. So first of all is understanding, is inflammation elevated? And there are a number of different ways I measure this. The 2 most common I use are HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and homocysteine. So HSCRP and homocysteine, those are the 2 I most commonly use. There are others I use also. And what happens is when inflammation is elevated, your body goes into metabolic conservation mode, AKA fat storage mode. And it makes sense if we think about it from a survival perspective, because inflammation is designed to tell the body that there's a problem. There's a broken bone, there's an infection. things like that. And so when inflammation is elevated, your body really wants to conserve its resources. Firstly, if we think about a long, long time ago, because you might not be able to get food for a bit if your leg's broken, right? So hold on to those calories, right?
Totally.
Fortunately, we're not in that situation, but when people get locked in for a lot of different reasons, the body can get locked into this chronic inflammatory state. And it's just, it's fighting an uphill battle trying to lose weight when that inflammation is elevated. So when that comes up high, we go hot and heavy hard against that inflammation. And there are a lot of different things we do to break the cycle and then ultimately get that metabolism revved up.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. The next one being insulin, right? Insulin, people often think either it's high or it's normal, but it's definitely, there can be suboptimal ranges. And so for me, I really like to see that fasting insulin at 7 or less.
Okay.
Ideally maybe even a little bit lower, but 7 or less that's respectable. That's a good place to be. But, depending on what lab you look at, a lot of them, out of normal, you're not going to see that till it's at 20. That's a big gap, a really big gap.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so when insulin is elevated, it is ultimately communicating to your body that you should store fuel, right? So store fuel means store fat, right? So that insulin sensitivity can be affected for a lot of different reasons. And the last one, I mentioned is those impaired detoxification pathways. And again, that can happen given by a number of different reasons. But when detox pathways are compromised and you're reabsorbing more toxins and your toxic load is elevated, it's going to throw off your hormones because your hormones go through those detox pathways as well, which is going to put you at a metabolic disadvantage. Toxins themselves interfere with our production of energy, aka ATP, which has a lot to do with our metabolism. So a lot of different ways that last point can impact our weight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just fascinating. And what I like about what you brought up is it wasn't like, okay, it's just your thyroid or, it's, just something like that. Like all the stuff that we normally hear as far as like why your weight may be elevated or you're getting these fluctuations. And not saying that stuff's not important, but there are other things like we talked about at the beginning that may not be being looked at, whether it's what are your inflammatory markers, what systemically, where's your level of inflammation, what is your what are your fasting insulin levels, is your insulin sensitivity impaired? And then looking at impaired detox. And that one is particularly interesting to me. I've heard in the past that oftentimes people will not be able to lose weight because of the toxins that are being stored in their fat, and their body knows, okay, if we burn this fat, we don't have any place to put these toxins. So the fact that you're saying, well, yeah, if you have improperly functioning or not well functioning detoxification pathways, you're not going to be able to lose it. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is so cool when we can start to rev up those detox pathways. And there's so much we could say about those detox pathways, right? The word detox is so chic these days, but they're actual, right? You throw detox on a supplement, you're probably going to sell a lot.
Exactly.
But they're real. We can understand how to support someone's detox pathways in a very specific way. And to your point, you're totally right, Charlie, right? When those detox pathways aren't running well, your body doesn't want to release those toxins into the rest of your body, right? It wants to sequester it into your fat, and partially to keep you safe. Right?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Absolutely. So you're looking at these labs and you're looking at their history, you're looking at, the person as a whole. And from what I gathered with earlier in our conversation, it's not like, okay, start taking these pills. You're saying, hey, my guess is like using food, using different kind of, like you were describing, more natural remedies. So I'm guessing like most people understand like food would be somewhat of a natural remedy. I'm guessing like supplements are coming to people's minds, but like what else is involved or could be involved for somebody when we're talking about natural remedies?
Yes, totally. Great question. You're so spot on. Nutrition, food is medicine. So nutrition is a big one we dive into. Supplementation as indicated, right? And one of the things I do when I work with people, it's so funny, right? I understand because it's so confusing and marketing can be so good, right? People will come to me with a cabinet full of supplements and say, I'm not even sure. I don't even remember why I started taking these, right? And so we'll do a supplement assessment as part of the work. But yes, the third place would be lifestyle, and lifestyle includes everything from movement and exercise to how we're sleeping, to our really actively engaging in de-stressing, right? Rejuvenating activities. So those, being with people and actually experiencing joy, that is totally a great natural lifestyle modification, making sure you're getting that in there.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I think we're going to see this more and more. I was just reading an article in the Washington Post the other day on about how much more time we're all spending alone, even since, obviously during the pandemic,
sure,
we were all, but we're not yet back to pre-pandemic, time togetherness.
Yeah.
And it's really important for our mental health and well-being.
No, absolutely. I remember reading a paper a number of years ago, but it was looking at men in particular and saying like, hey, actually guys that like go out and drink beer with their buddies tend to, have greater longevity or whatever than guys that just like totally stay isolated because of that community, that connection aspect. So I think like you're saying that we undervalue that a lot, especially in Western society, and especially given everything that's happened in recent years. There was a period of time where we, believed we needed to do it for, a safety and well-being standpoint. And so now we're starting to kind of break free from that and understand that, we can be with people again and whatnot. But just the importance of, hey, making sure that we're taking the time throughout our day, throughout our week to have that connection, have that community.
Yes, absolutely.
So if somebody's listening to this right now, or when they're listening to this right now, and they're thinking to themselves, yeah, I've experienced this weight loss roller coaster, what would you suggest they do? Like whether it's, hey, like definitely go get these labs run, or just where should they start within their life?
So I am going to invite your listeners, anyone who can relate, right, to that weight loss roller coaster, and you're just really ready to draw a line in the sand. I'm going to invite you to start by telling the story of the 5-year future with your health and vitality as you intend and desire it to be. In other words, I'd like you to do a little bit of time traveling and go to a 5-year future. Imagine your weight handled. Imagine it actually occurring with a bit of ease, right? It's not difficult to eat the way that allows you to feel your best and look your best and be your best, or move, all the different things that would allow that 5-year future to be possible. So I actually would like you to tell that story of your 5-year future in first person present tense, right? And by that, I mean, I'm 46 right now, so I'd say I'm 51 and my body is beautiful, strong, resilient, right? I'd say whatever else there is for me. And I'd also talk about what that makes available for me in my life, right? And the reason for that, Charlie, is that I really believe, in my experience, what I have seen over and over and over again is we don't buy what we do, we buy why we do it. In other words, sometimes the what is not super compelling, right? The what of get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym. That moment when the alarm goes off may or may not be fueled with inspiration, right? But ultimately, if you're really present to what that makes available, when the alarm goes off, it doesn't even matter what the monster in your head says, right? It's like, it's totally irrelevant because your what is so much bigger. Maybe you've gone to college and pulled all-nighters. I bet that wasn't super fun, right? I know firsthand it wasn't, but the why was, it didn't even occur to you not to, right? Or people who are parents, and what that takes. Sometimes the what's not super fun, but the why just cancels it all out.
Absolutely.
When you're present to it. So the first step to me is really getting clear on your why. And it said another way is getting clear on your intention, for your health in your life.
That's awesome. Dr. H, that is so powerful. I hope all of our listeners take the time to do that. I mean, that is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. How can people connect with you? How can they learn more about your work? How can they work with you?
Yeah, so they can find me at wellempowered.com, where you can please feel free to schedule a complimentary consultation. And for anyone who does schedule that complimentary consultation and does ultimately feel like it would be a good fit in working together, it would be my pleasure to offer you 10% off if you mentioned that you heard our conversation today.
I love it.
Yeah. And, I will be offering some courses in the new year on mastering your middle ground. So for anyone who maybe you'd rather be part of a course, maybe that's a better fit for you, please, schedule that complimentary consultation. We'll talk about the details of that as well.
Awesome. Right on. Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Definitely. The question that we like wrapping up with for all of our guests is, Dr. H, what is your definition of health?
Oh my goodness. My definition of health is experiencing being empowered by my body, mind, and spirit's beauty and ability, and really using that to be a contribution to other. So to me, they are together. That is my definition of health.
I love it. That's beautiful. Dr. H, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise with us. It was a fascinating conversation. Again, just shedding light on a really important topic of, hey, let's try to get off this weight loss roller coaster. If that's something that you're wanting to do, there are some steps that you can take, and you may not be being taught about them anywhere else. So definitely check out your website, wellempowered.com. Connect with you. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's been a treat to be with you.
Likewise.
Wow, what a fascinating interview. If you're interested in connecting further with Dr. Hehmeyer, make sure you check out the links that she gave us. We'll also link them in the show notes below. Also, if you are digging the content we've been talking about on the podcast and you want to do more with Charlie and I, we'd love to invite you to become an Exercise for Life member. We just opened up a membership, and becoming a member gives you instant access to so many programs, including our very first program, the MAS Home Workouts program, our educational content, our premium courses and programs. People have just been loving this, from getting more consistent with their exercise. We heard back from a handful of our members. One was saying their back was feeling amazing. One was saying their knee is feeling amazing. These workouts are just completely transformative, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home with minimal equipment. So if you're interested in becoming a member and really working with Charlie and I in applying the principles that we talk about all throughout the Exercise is Health podcast, just go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/membership. And we can't wait to work out with you soon.
So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is concerned that their metabolism may be slowing down? Share this episode with them so they can learn about 3 reasons that they may have never heard of before as to why this is happening and what they can do about it. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcasts when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.